Hello, viewers. Let's have a quick introduction of biodiversity and its types. So, essentially, biodiversity means variability amongst the living organisms. That's why it is diversity amongst the living organisms. So, variability among the living organisms in an ecosystem is what we call as biodiversity. As per the International Union for Conservation of Nature, that is IUCN, biodiversity can include organisms from many different sources. It could be the terrestrial source, it could be aquatic sources that includes both fresh water and marine water, and the entire ecological complex of which they are a part. This is what we call as biodiversity, which means to say it can be considered at different levels or different scales. It can include the tiniest of microorganisms to the largest of beasts and the trees. Even genetic material like seeds or in fact germplasm can be considered as biodiversity. So what it means to say is that all forms of biological entities that are inhabiting the earth are considered under biodiversity. Now, this has three levels. The first level is genetic biodiversity or genetic diversity. This is the variation of genes within a particular species. Now, the genes combine differently and due to the different combinations, they come out with new versions of the same organism. This helps the populations to adapt to difficult environments, and this is something that we even use in agriculture and breeding so that we can get a new type of plant or a new type of animal, a new version of that animal that can increase the productivity. One example where genetic diversity was not there and that was the reason for such a big famine is the Great Famine which happened in 19th century, where the potato crops were destroyed. Now, this is partly due to lack of biodiversity. The reason being, potato is a cloned plant. So it comes from the pieces of the parent plant. And that's why all the potato plants were susceptible to the same fungal infection. And that is the reason so many potato crops were destroyed, and that led to starving of more than 1 million people. So that is a scenario wherein there was no diversity, there was no genetic diversity, which led to the famine. The second type of diversity is species diversity. Species diversity is the diversity or variety of species within a particular region. So far, 1.7 million species have been identified on Earth, and we know that there are many, many more which have not yet been identified. So it includes only the biotic part of the ecosystem and only talks about organisms, either plants or animals or microorganisms. The ecosystem with most species diversity is the one which has a large number of species, but none are outnumbering the rest. So almost all the species are at an equal level. That is what we call as an ecosystem with the maximum or the best species diversity. And this kind of diversity is seen within as well as between populations of a particular species, or it could be even seen between different species. So that is what we call as species diversity. The key to remember here is that between species and ecosystem, that is the next type, species is only considering the biotic factors, whereas ecosystem is talking about the biotic and the abiotic factor. It addresses both the properties of a particular ecosystem. So ecosystem or habitat biodiversity or diversity is the variation in ecosystems within a particular geographical location. So in one region, there can be more than one ecosystem. So if I say a region has poor ecosystem diversity, it could be a vast expanse of desert. But on the other hand, a mountainous region, for example, the one shown in the picture, which is having lake, it has a forest, it has a grassland, that region has much more ecosystem diversity. So even if one of the ecosystems is threatened due to a disease or due to a drought, the native species of that ecosystem can jump into the one which is there beside it. So this is an ecosystem which is showing great ecosystem diversity because there are different types of ecosystems in the same region. Now, these were the three levels or types of biodiversity. Let us look at the biodiversity patterns. So, Charles Darwin described three patterns of biodiversity. So, not only are there levels, not only are there types, there are also biodiversity patterns. Now, what it means to say is that these are of three types, that is global, local, and with time. Let us see each one of them in detail. Species vary globally, that is, they are varying with the latitude and the altitude of a place, and the diversity is more at generally the diversity is more at lower latitudes, that is near the equator. So globally, if we see in this pattern of diversity, species which are living in similar ecosystems but on a global region, in the global region and on a different geographical location in different parts of the world, it makes them distantly related because They act and look quite similar. They look similar, they act similar, but they are placed in different parts of the world. One very good example of this are the emus which are found in Australia. You can see that all of them, what I have shown here, are flightless birds. Emus which are in Australia, rheas which are found in South America, and ostriches which are found in Africa. All of them look similar. Their behavior of being flightless is similar, but they are diverse because they are present in different parts of the world, and that is why they have now become distantly related. In the second type of diversity, that is the local diversity, species vary locally. This too is associated with the latitude and the altitude of a place. So in this pattern of diversity, the animal species are occupying different habitats within the same local area. This global is, we are talking about different parts of the world, but locally, when we say the pattern of biodiversity is varying, it means the species are present in different habitats but within the same area. One very good example here is the Galapagos Islands, which is a group of islands that are very close to each other, but each one has its own climate. Each one has a different climate. So Charles Darwin saw differences in the ecological conditions of the islands, and along with that, he observed that there is difference in the shell shape of tortoises. So you can see here, one of the islands called as the Isabella Island has high peaks and it has very high rainfall. It is also having very rich vegetation. So the tortoise which is found on this island is having a short neck and a dome shaped shell, as you can see over here. On the other hand, Hood Island is characterized by much lower elevations and the climate is much more drier, due to which the vegetation is also lesser. So the tortoise on this island is having a long neck and a saddle backed shell. So you can see that as the islands vary with their climate, though they are present in the same region, because of the variations in climate, the organisms which live there are also diverse. So it has been seen even with respect to birds. The same kind of variation has even been seen with respect to mockingbirds, not only tortoises. So this is another example of, or this is another type of biodiversity pattern, that is the species vary locally. The third one says that species vary over time. So the first two are in relation to the latitude and the altitude. The last one is that species vary with time. This we all very well know through the studies of fossils. It has been found that there were some really enormous versions of modern day species. For example, the modern day armadillo is very much similar to the fossil remains of another animal that was called as the glyptodont. So the glyptodont fossil is much larger. It is almost 3 meters long, whereas armadillo is only around 50 centimeters long. But we can see that over time there have been changes and there is diversity. So these are the three patterns of diversity, that is globally, locally, and with time. I hope this video was useful to all of you. In the next video, we'll be looking at the value of biodiversity. Thank you.